If I'm gonna play as an evil douchebag, make me an evil douchebag. Don't try to pretend that by killing thousands of people I'm actually saving the world from you. If you haven't yet played Prototype, you play as a character named Alex Mercer, who makes up a one-man resistance against the fascist military and psychopathic infected who slowly take over the city as the game progresses. At the end of the game, he basically ends up saving the entire city and basically becomes Jesus in a hoodie. Except he's also the biggest mass murderer since, let's say, Stalin. The mechanics of Prototype revolve around killing as many people as possible in as many over-the-top ways as possible while inside this big giant New York City sandbox. And it's a very fun game because it has such a single-minded commitment to that ultimate ideal. You karate kick helicopters out of the air, you slice up literal crowds of people with a single button press, and you basically eat human beings at will in order to gain their appearance and their knowledge, and it's fun. But these mechanics do not, under any circumstances, lend themselves to a protagonist who is anything other than a raving, sadistic psychopath. You'll complete side quests that ask you to kill a certain amount of people with a certain weapon within a certain amount of time in order to get bonus experience points, so you can then buy more abilities that allow you to kill more people even faster. Then the narrative comes in and says, oh, by the way, you're basically the savior of this city when you're not slicing it up for shits and giggles. Even though Infamous's black and white morality system was exactly that, you at least knew where you stood with Cole, the protagonist. He was either a selfless savior or a heartless bastard. Prototype kind of wants it both ways, where they give you the gameplay mechanics of a selfish bastard, but give you the narrative that would seem to imply that this guy is a great hero and a savior. Throughout the game, Alex works with a lot of really seemingly good, uninfected people throughout his quests. Really nice people like Dana, his sister or something like that, and this other morgue attendant who helps the guy do a lot of shit. But would any of these people really want to do anything to help Alex Mercer if they saw the relentless glee with which he eviscerates others and eats them and takes their bodies and just fucking surfs on them, literally surfs on them if he feels like it? X-Men Origins Wolverine, the game, also dabbled in a little bit of this self-contradiction as well. There are a bunch of times when Wolverine and Sabretooth are arguing, and Sabretooth will tell Wolverine to admit it, man, you're just an animal and that's all you're ever going to be, and Wolverine says, no, I'm not an animal, I'm not a vicious, sadistic killer who thrills at violence. Which sort of makes me wonder, like, have you seen the game that you're in? Have you seen what you've been doing to the bad guys that you've come up against? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with building a game around killing a shitload of people, because that can obviously be really fun and really satisfying, but I think there is something wrong with trying to lie to the player or lie to yourself as a designer and pretend that a character whose gameplay consists solely of cutting people in half for the silly shit of it, or eating them alive, or doing fun, really violent stuff while grunting emphatically and saying one-liners is a hero in any real sense of the word. This is why I love Kratos from God of War. The mechanics of controlling Kratos revolve entirely around brutality and violence and hatred, but the story doesn't shy away from that and pretend that he's actually just this misunderstood hero who's all in it for the greater good. Kratos is a villain, plain and simple, who has absolutely no empathy for human life and is driven only by hatred and bloodlust. And that's reflected perfectly in the mechanics, where you're basically just ripping people apart for the shit of it, and in the way that other characters react to Kratos, where you meet people and they would rather be killed by demons than be saved by Kratos, and they'd want to do everything they can to get away from you. If someone looked at footage from God of War 2 and thought, oh, that's sadistic and that's evil, then they'd be absolutely right, because that's the point. And the game doesn't try to pussy out of that interpretation because it's an honest one and it's a reasonable one given the way that the mechanics tend to back things up. But games like Prototype or Wolverine, or to a lesser extent Hulk Ultimate Destruction by the guys who made Prototype, they want to have their cake and cut it into teeny tiny bloody pieces too, which strikes me as somewhat morally indefensible. It's perfectly fine to let me revel in the joys of carnage and misanthropy and hatred and violence, but don't pretend for a second that I'm making the world a better place by doing so.